Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Austin Sterling. I'm with Pinion. Pinion is the nation's leading food and ag business advisory firm. We have a lot of different services we help our clients with, but again, today we'll be focusing in on estate and succession planning for your farming and ranching operation. This will be a video series throughout the year. We're going to cover a lot of different topics, with the goal being we're going to talk about the different perspectives of each member or family member around that farm family table as it pertains to your succession plan for your business. Video one, Lance and Kevin talk to the patriarch, the matriarch, the head of the family. This episode, we're going to be diving into the on-farm heirs, the ones that are maybe not in control now, but are the next in line to run the operation, own the land, and how do they successfully carry that on to the next generation. I've got two more awesome experts with us today, Devon Cook out of our Loveland, Colorado office, and Chris Ponna still out of our Wichita, Kansas office. They both have different roles in the firm that help with these plans. I'll have them tell a little bit about themselves and their experience in this field. Chris, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Austin. My name is Chris Fonenstill. I'm a CPA out of our Wichita, Kansas office. So I've been with the firm roughly 17 years and work in tax planning, and have done a lot of estate planning with succession planning as well. So I work with clients in Kansas, Oklahoma, and then probably 2/3 of my clients are in Indiana and Ohio. So I've got to see a lot of different situations, both from the tax and the estate side, and have really enjoyed learning and working with families on these goals.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Devon?
Hi, I'm Devon Cook. I've been with Pinion almost 5 years, but been doing this type of specific family business facilitation with ag families for almost 12 years now, with a previous company I owned with Lance Woodbury. And really my whole career's been involved with family ag businesses. Spent time in the middle of my career helping manage my own family's cotton gin in Texas, and then worked through the years in various capacities with some ag input suppliers. So like Chris, spent my whole career interacting with the folks that are clients today. And I tend to specialize a little bit more on convening the family to have these tough conversations, make some of the decisions about what they want to accomplish, and then help them engage with the tax advisors or the attorneys that they need to make it happen.
Great. Thanks, Devon. Thanks, Chris. I'm glad you both could join us today. Chris, we'll dive in with you. I know you've been all over the place, met with lots of different families, and some families start from scratch. Some families have sort of a plan put together. Some think they have a plan. I guess in generalities, what questions or first steps as an on-farm heir, what if you don't have a plan? What if your parents don't have a plan? What are some questions you can start asking, or what position are you in to start moving that plan forward if there is none?
I think the first step for that on-farm heir is to communicate with their parents or the leaders of the farm that they intend to be there. They want to stay on the farm. They want to see the farm continue through their generation and on down the line, and want to work with them to either develop that plan or want to know what role they have in the plan that their parents have already laid out. So I think communicating their intention is the first step to get that dialogue started. And then also working with their family to make sure they understand what the plan entails if they do have something. A lot of times we'll meet with producers that say, yeah, I have a plan. And then when somebody asks them what it is, their response is, well, I don't know. I'm going to have to go look at it. So making sure that there's some understanding of what they have. But I think the first biggest step is just that communication, that I want to be here. I want to help this grow and continue down the line. How do we do that together?
Yeah, I think sometimes I like to think of those people as the family champion. Like, there may be multiple siblings, and sometimes we see the leader of the family member kind of helping instigate those tough conversations. Sometimes it's the obvious person, maybe it's the one child that is working in the business. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a child that's maybe a little more removed from the business, but still worried about their parents having a plan and the impact that's going to have on all their siblings. And so you really need that one person to just kind of raise their hand and say, I care enough about this to be the champion of the cause, and just sort of build some momentum for getting started.
Yeah, that's great advice. And my next question for you, Devon, is kind of having the conversation is always a big deal for people to get started with that. And that's one of the first obstacles. But, knowing the generations that we work with, we all work in farming, it's part of the industry as well. But I guess what advice would you give to an on-farm ag producer with a father or grandfather or whoever's running the farm that does have a little trouble letting go or being transparent about the plan?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we say the plan, I think, depending on your situation, we may be talking about a lot of different things. I know in the previous installment of this series, Kevin and Lance talked a lot about estate planning side. I'm going to talk a little bit more today about the transition of leadership. So, Chris and his team and the tax advisors are going to do a great job helping you figure out how to move the ownership and the wealth. But then the hard part is living that every day and handing off the baton of leadership. So in those cases, we often see people doing kind of this awkward, I call it the awkward generational dance. And I even have a picture on the slide I use sometimes of this really 1970s dressed kids looking super nerdy and weird doing a dance. But the point is, this happens. I see it all the time. So the senior gen is kind of stepping back going, well, I'm waiting for them to step up and show me they want to take authority. And the rising generation, whatever age they are, whether they're 20s, 30s, or 40s, or some cases 50s, they're humble. I mean, we raised our kids in ag to be humble and respectful. And so they're respectfully kind of waiting until they're given permission. And so you end up with this, this awkward impasse. So I think once you get those conversations started, one of the most important things you can do is have both generations sit down and say, what do we want the long-term outcome to be? And I encourage people to literally use a timeline. Like I would love to see you have flip chart pages on the wall and put the next, 10 or 20 years, whatever time frame is relevant for you, and put people's ages on there too. And say, hey, okay, we agree that our goal is by 2030, mom and dad are gonna be able to travel 3 months in the winter, and they're gonna be able to be gone for 2 months at a time during planting or harvest season. I mean, something really specific like that. And those types of goals at different timeframes is really helps make it real. Like I'm a big fan of once it's on paper, it's visual, and it's oftentimes a reality check. I've had families when they sat down to do this, maybe the senior generation's thinking, oh, I'll slow down in 10 years or 15 years. We get this on the wall and they realize, oh, my kid's going to be 50, 15 years from now by the time I decide to slow down. Then they go, oh, wow, that's not what I want for my kid. I want them to have opportunities to leave before they're 50. So that can be a really tangible tool, I think, that helps get the conversation more specific.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea, Devon, to put those goals where if everybody can see them and keep them moving forward. Oftentimes, like I talked about before, not knowing what the plan is, you see it wrote down on a piece of paper, then put in a drawer and forgotten about. So having that timeline up where people can see it and have to think about it to keep it moving forward is a great idea.
Yeah.
No, that's good advice. And I mean, as we saw with COVID, and it's anything can happen. And I feel like, you have these big drawn out conversations. It's not just a quick conversation at dinner. These plans and these conversations have to evolve over time, and, anything can happen. And, Chris, that brings me to my next question to you. I know you've seen a million scenarios play out. What kind of problems, scenarios, options for an on-farm heir that does have an unexpected death of their dad, their grandfather, whoever, that leaves them in this mess with no plan, and on the flip side, by doing something and setting something up and getting the ball rolling before, and they can take part in the, in the conversation. I guess, what have you seen that some bad pitfalls and some positives that have come from that?
The problem of not having a plan can be on the estate side and the succession side, because if there's no estate plan, you often can run into federal estate taxes being due, or state estate taxes, depending on your location, that can significantly cash strap or handicap an operation for several years as those are paid off. So knowing that cash flow impact is a big thing, but also then the impact of possibly having owners that weren't actively involved, had left the farm, off-farm heirs that now come into ownership and don't want to be owners, and you end up having to buy them out. and figure that out on your own without any written rules or buy-sell provisions to help you accomplish what your parents wanted. You know, that can be one of the biggest problems, is simply the unknown of how do we navigate all these things that suddenly we have to deal with that could have been avoided. So the cash flow impact can be huge when somebody passes suddenly. And then also, if there hasn't been a plan from the succession side, what skills were never developed? So what things did you rely on dad or the leader of the operation to handle that had always been, well, down the road, I'll teach you how to do this or where I do this, but was never done. So suddenly you're left with cash flow impact, as well as trying to get up to speed and operating on things that you might have never realized you were behind on or didn't have the skill set to do.
And to add to that, like I wholeheartedly agree with both of those. And I think there's a third factor, which is just pure family stress, right? I mean, even if the best case, it doesn't cause, you don't have to sell anything to pay estate taxes, and maybe in the end, all the heirs and siblings can get along in the end with a solution. They still had to go through the process of figuring that out without having a good understanding of what their parents' desires would have been. And that's just really stressful on relationships. So I think as parents and parents that are blessed enough to own assets worth having this conversation about, you know, it's part of our responsibility to leave our kids with that peace of mind that we've shared, you know, what we hoped would happen and our rationale for it. And of course they're adults and they may make their own decisions later, but there's just a big peace of mind factor for the people on the left behind, you know, those that are inheriting the assets.
That's
Yeah,
that's absolutely right, Devon.
and you know, like the old adage, you know, leave it better than you found it. I feel like we talk to a lot of producers that want to leave the farm in a better place than they got it from their, you know, inheritance as well. And Devon, I guess too, you know, we work with 3, 4, 5th generation farms, you know, so they've successfully done this transition before in their operation. I guess, do you see, you know, in the turn of the century, with the way the world is right now globally, the farming economy, everything else, do you feel like there's more modern challenges today that we're facing, our generations are facing, versus 10, 20, 50 years ago with this type of family transition?
I think there's maybe some different challenges. I don't know that it's necessarily harder today or easier. I mean, I think every generation's had challenges of dealing with tax laws and money and cash flow. It was just at different multiples today. But I think there's some modern things impacting it that honestly, even if when I look back at the 12 years I've been specifically facilitating families, I can just think of the frequency of a lot of conversations changing in my time. And that is, you know, women have a very different role in society and in our ag businesses today. And that has a few different impacts. I mean, obviously I'm a woman, I'm excited about that. I think it's a great thing. But when you start talking about handoff of both assets and leadership, you know, decades ago, it would have been pretty normal and totally endorsed by society that the boys get the land. Or, you know, we all have heard some stories of some families where assets were handed down pretty, in some branches, usually towards the men. Now I've been the facilitator of some families a generation or two past that had already, you know, had some resentment about that. So I'm not endorsing it, but I'm just noting that, you know, that would have been completely unquestioned 50 years ago, whereas today we're having a lot more modern conversations around, you know, what is fair. And, you know, certainly in our business, we talk a lot about being fair doesn't mean it's equal. So please don't hear me saying I endorse everything always being equal. There's lots of good reasons it may not be, but I just think we're having that conversation more holistically involving women than we did before. And sort of related to that, even in the last 5 years, I'm hearing more modern day spouses talking about also challenging that norm that oftentimes we pass assets down by bloodline, right? And so we tend to think of the next generation assets passing to the bloodline children. Spouses may be well provided for with a lot of the trust that we use. You know, they're getting income from the business and they're definitely provided for. But there was just this assumption that, you know, the assets should stay in the bloodline for simplicity sometimes, for trying to prevent conflict, and for some tax reasons. And all good reasons in a lot of situations. But I'm hearing some modern day couples challenge that a little bit to their parents and say, wait a minute, in our marriage, that's not how we think about our partnership. And, the spouse has been very involved in the business. Now those are tough conversations. They're very much challenging the norm, but I'm hearing it more than I did even 5 years ago. And then the third one I think about changing is, I think as a whole, in a younger generation, our lifestyles have changed at different life stages. And so you may hear the senior generation, grumping a little bit of like, oh, they don't want to work the long hours, or they don't want to be on call on the weekend. And some of that is, yeah, life has changed. And I don't think we have to judge that that's right or wrong. It's just different. So, fathers today are expected to change diapers, and lots of households have two professionals with careers. And, a lot of those, both parents want to be coaching the sports team and want to be at the school events and are expected to by society, right? So it's just, the whole framework has changed. And I don't think there's a lot of value in pointing fingers of who's right or wrong or better or worse. It's just realizing it's changed, and we've got to kind of adapt our planning around that.
And I think too, Devon, to take it just a little different direction, the norm of, well, I'm operating a farm, so my wife is going to be the bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Is gone too. The younger generations of farm wives, some may want to be a bookkeeper, but I have several clients who their spouse is their best sprayer driver, or is active on the farm in other ways, or has no interest in being active on the farm. And if something happens to mom, they have no interest in doing the books. So knowing what roles need filled down the road is important too.
Yeah, that's great. And it, related to that, as our asset sizes are growing and the complexity of farms are getting bigger and bigger, there's more opportunities for those professional roles like CFO or,
Yeah.
any number of things, a full-time HR person. And those professional needs may be met by a family member and very well may not be. And we can justify paying a professional for some of those positions.
Absolutely.
But yeah, a lot of challenges along the way here for an on-farm heir, and Chris, rolling back to what you first said about, raising the flag saying, I want to be on the farm and I want to be a part of this. But as well as I do, we talked to plenty of these families that maybe the dad or whoever doesn't care that they want to communicate, and it's their plan and it's their farm, and they they'll tell them what they need to know, kind of thing. And at one point, at what point does that on farm heir, what can you do? Maybe there's not much, but to protect themselves and their legacy and maybe their kids, what can you do if dad won't budge and won't have that conversation? Are there anything you can put in place, or what recommendations you would have to get them in a safer place for their family?
Yeah, I think even if you're active on the farm and hoping to be the leader or operator of the farm down the road, some basic steps to take would be, your estate plan, your succession plan on what you're doing, making it clear that, hey, I'm developing somebody behind me to fill the roles that I have, because someday I want to step into your shoes and take on more, or I've got a backup so I can take on more and expand my knowledge base too, so that everybody sees that you're trying to grow in the operation and grow in your position. On the estate planning side, make sure you're covered and you're doing the right things too, so that you can have that conversation of, hey, I want to be here. Here's what I'm doing to protect my family, and here's what I'm doing to protect you too. Now we need to talk about what you're doing to protect me. So covering your own assets first, and then pushing to have that conversation. Not every generation is going to be willing to have that conversation, and that is tough to overcome. But showing that your goal is the best, or excuse me, your goal is the protection of the operation, and to see it succeed and move forward is probably the first steps that I can think of.
Yeah, I love what you said about take care of your own business while you're asking your parents to take care of theirs. I think right now, especially with the state tax law changing, there's so much conversation about, senior generation, make your gifting now and so forth. And it's easy to focus there. And I work with a number of families that have, siblings that are, still have parents active in the business. So yes, we're focused on the parents' estate planning, but the next generation are in their 40s. And it's time for them to start thinking about not only their own estate planning, but also their plan for what is the partnership look like in their next generation. So, they've got kids in junior high and high school. They're not that far away from what we call this cousin consortium stage. I'm going to pull up a slide real quick. You think about controlling on our first generation, sibling partnerships, and then when you get to cousin consortium, there's a lot more people and there's a lot more complexity. And so if you're, and some folks listening to this call may be at the second cousin consortium and the third cousin consortium stage over here. But I just think I see so many people focused on their parents' estate planning that they're forgetting that, hey, we're in our 40s and we have kids coming of age, and it's time to start talking about ourselves too.
Mhm. Yeah, I've worked with families where the younger generation has suddenly passed before the older generation. And that throws a whole new set of curves into the operation. And luckily, the ones I've worked with, we had done some of that planning so that their children that did want to come back to the farm still had a place and were able to, versus having to rely then on grandpa to give them that opportunity. It had already been taken care of. So that's a huge step to take is manage your own plan. When thinking about how to, help parents down that road too, is think through, are they open to letting, if there is a partnership in place, can you at least see the operating agreements, things like that, that maybe could have buy-sell provisions spelled out so that, even if they don't do any other planning, maybe you can have the first right of refusal or opportunities to either buy into the operation or buy some ground from your siblings that aren't on the operation. So there's some things you can do there as well.
Oh, great stuff, guys. That's awesome. Great conversation today. And I'm going to ask you guys both one question to close here. And we've all met families that haven't started any kind of leadership pass on or succession estate plan, and they've got that rough look at their eyes at the mountain they have to climb, and they don't know what they don't know and everything else. And then you've got these other operations that have crawled through it, finished a plan, like where their operation is, and have some clarity. I guess in your experience, talk about how the impact it can have for any farmer, any ag producer that has that plan, and what that peace of mind looks like and how it impacts their daily life and their operation.
Well, I go back to the peace of mind. I mean, I think just if you've got a plan in place, and I want to stress one thing, it's not just have it in place, it's have communicated and shared it with everyone. Make sure that you've shared with your children if they're of a appropriate age. And if your parents have done estate planning, a lot of times our on-farm heirs, on-farm siblings will end up being, they'll know a lot more about the parents' estate plan than their other siblings, just by nature of they were close by, they probably helped execute part of it through the business and so forth. It's so important to encourage your parents to call a family meeting, get all the siblings together, invite the attorney to come help explain it, invite the accountant to come help explain it. And, as the person working in the farm and, having a really vested interest, it's important that the rest of your siblings don't get surprises and they have a fair opportunity to ask questions and understand it together. So I think I want to just really stress having the plan is not enough. You've still got to make sure everybody understands it. But then once you've done that, a lot of peace of mind that, you've got enough challenges every day running the business and staying profitable. This is one thing that you've been really proactive and strategic at taking care of for the future, and you should be proud of that.
Absolutely. And I think Vaughn's spot on with talking about having the plan, but communicating it as well. And I would really say, have a professional there to help explain that, because you want to make sure everybody hears the same message. And, a lot of times clients I work with, they understand their estate plan, they understand their succession plan. They may not be able to completely communicate it though. So having someone like Pinion come in and be able to sit down and walk through it and answer questions professionally can really help everybody gain an understanding, and at the same time can help mitigate anybody being upset. So if they're hearing it from a third party versus mom and dad or versus a sibling, there's a big difference there on the emotional impact too. So I think that's a big important piece of it. And just from you know, affect their daily life, you know, having that plan and living that plan helps you move forward those goals and accomplishment. Having everybody, you know, once you've communicated that plan and are striving towards it, if everybody's moving the same direction, you know, it does give you the satisfaction of knowing that everybody wants the same thing and this is the best thing for the operation, and that the family has a plan too, and it's the best thing for the family as well. So once everybody's moving in the same direction, if anybody does have questions or concerns down the road, you're able to address those versus nobody knowing what's going on and it's resentment springing up, you know, seemingly out of nowhere, or something that's been boiling for a long time but hasn't been communicated. So being able to take that out and deal with that directly has a huge impact as well.
And you know, for the most part, people are grateful when you bring it up, when you make those conversations happen. Your siblings, you know, or when I get involved and start interviewing family members, you know, so many times I hear, thank goodness somebody's finally talking about this. So those first few steps can be scary, but usually people are relieved and thrilled that you're doing it.
Absolutely.
That's great, guys. Well, thank you for the conversation today, Chris and Devon. Thanks for joining us as well. We'll have more of these videos throughout the summer. If you have any questions for Chris and Devon or anyone opinion, check us out at opinionglobal.com. Thank you. We'll see you next time.